For the last 30 years, the model of globalization that has existed, it was engineered by the United States and its allies, but it has proven to be untenable. Western countries have led humanity not to prosperity, but to one of the most acute international crises since the Second World War. The conflict space is expanding in the world, and a deep divide has emerged between the West and the world majority. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, after its disappearance from the world stage, the West began to impose its rule-based order, essentially its unchallenged dominance in economy, finance, and politics and culture. The Golden Billion enthusiastically took up the neo-colonial development of the post-Soviet space, along with the countries of the global South and East. Abusing the trust of the world majority, the aggressive minority, led by the United States, improved colonial practices and did not disdain using force, as was the case in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and other countries in Asia and in Africa. In the economic area, tools were used such as limiting opportunities for independent development, forcing people to conclude unfair contracts, pumping out all types of resources at low prices formed on Western exchanges. Former metropolises used illegal measures of sanction pressures against countries that do not want to subdue themselves to the leaders and at the expense of their sovereignty and national identity. The American embargo against the heroic Cuban people, sanctions against Venezuela, Iran, Nicaragua, and many other countries include, of course, Korean People's Republic. They became the instrument in the foreign policy of Western countries. The skills of diplomacy as the skill to find the resolution in the Northern America and in Europe are lost. I would like to give several examples of the relations of the West to the world minority. In 2010, 14 years ago, developing countries were promised $100 billion annually for 10 years for the purposes of climate finance. The West was not in a hurry to fulfill its promises, and from the funds that they promised, crumbs were allocated. 5 years later, the formula 10 billion for 10 years was reconfirmed, but nothing changed. But the climate agenda fully activated market benefits of the countries at the face of the lower countries. The countries have to bear additional costs and buy expensive goods, green technology in the West. Money that were promised for development were spent, and you can see it. They are spent on supplies of weapons to the Kiev regime and other military adventures. No less indicative is the example of vaccine distribution during the COVID-19 pandemic. From the very beginning, Westerners and the United States bought everything and left the poor and in need along with their problems. At the same time, sanctions and the Western countries artificially delayed the certification of Sputnik vaccine, which could save millions of lives in developing countries. And the Western countries were certified in Europe, violating all the processes. Immediately they were certified, and nobody is responsible for cases of the highest diseases from their use. From another area of neocolonialism, the imposition of neoliberal attitudes to the detriment of traditional spiritual and moral values. Luckily, this destructive politics are the concepts of such as gender diversity, legalization of drugs, and transhumanism. Sincere indignation is caused by the impunity with which Westerners conduct biological experiments on living people, according to new data from the Russian Ministry of Defense, confirmed by journalistic investigations. In the city of Mariupol, once controlled by Kiev regime, large European and American companies conducted experiments on children and adults for no money. They used the medicine that suppressed the immune system and stimulated the growth of cancer cells. These trials were focused on the spread of diseases and epidemics among representatives of the Slavic race. The collected material was sent to European laboratories. Their further fate is unknown. The West will never show the world the facts of the biological experiments that are illegal. This demonstrates the violation of international documents, including the document on biological and chemical safety. We see that the international law is violated and human lives are not merited. We see that the hegemony is trying hard to preserve its dominance. Ukraine is an instrument in the hands of the Americans. We all understand that the future world order is at stake, and the question is decided: will the world become just, democratic, and polycentric, or a small group of states will manage to impose the world its unipolar order? The dividing of the world for those who are unique and for those who will have to follow the others. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, gave multiple examples in his speeches. Our choice in any situation is the negotiation to find the balance and legal interests of the parties. I would like to underline legal interests. If the allies want to continue impose their ultimatums, hoping to maintain the instruments of neo-colonial politics, this is their choice. Russia is prepared for this. Neo-colonialism is a dead-end path. Anyone who follows them is doomed to internal conflict. Just enough to look at the relationship within the Western camp itself, where some neo-colonialists have already begun to devour others. Against the backdrop of the economic problems, the Americans almost openly began to suck resources from European countries, cutting them off from the reliable energy supplies and promising markets for their products. For that sake, they exploded North Stream gas channels, and everybody had to agree with this. The Europe is subdued by these actions, and they forgot their longings for strategic autonomy and their respect, self-respect. Now European industry had to choose between moving its business to the other end of the world and to be bankrupted. But Europe shall care themselves. In Europe, they should care themselves for themselves. The system of exploitation that is represented by neo-colonial practices cannot be justified by anything. A constructive alternative exists to form a just and multipolar system of international relations based on the principles of the UN Charter, first of all on the principle of sovereign equality of states. It is extremely important to ensure the application of the principle of indivisibility of security at the regional and global levels, not only in military and political, but also in economic, social, and other aspects. The formation of multipolar world, the world order that would reflect objectively cultural and civilizational diversity of the modern world and take into account the right of each people to decide their own destiny, is a historically objective, and it is an irreversible process. A key role is played by new centers of power, such as China, Economic Organization, BRICS, ASEAN, CELAC, the Latin American and Caribbean countries association, and other integration structures of the world majority. It is important to strengthen the position of these countries and international institutions, first of all in the Security Council of the United Nations and the Group of 20, especially after admission of the African Union to the G20. It is necessary to develop horizontal ties between the regional associations of different continents and build a network of constructive and mutually beneficial cooperation. BRICS could play a coordinating role at the global level. At one time, our country played an important role in promoting decolonization processes. Victory in the Great Patriotic War, which came at a huge price, made it possible to stop for generations the expansion of the West. In difficult conditions of the Cold War, Soviet Union laid the foundation of industry in friendly countries of the global South and East, helping them to ensure their security and implement their rights for sovereign development. And this is not to mention the inspiring example of the USSR, which spurred people's liberation movements around the world. And today, Russia, despite pressure from the West, is again fighting not only for itself but also for the whole world, as President Putin aptly noted. In our joint efforts, we propose, first of all, to develop common approaches of the world majority to understanding neocolonialism and to finish what was started by Soviet diplomats, the work on decolonization, because till the moment the dependence of the other states, there are metropolises that do not want to liberate the countries despite the requirements of the certain declarations of the United Nations. This is the time to join the efforts of all like-minded people who gathered here to start a systematic work on elimination of the practices of colonization. I am sure that the work of this forum of fighters against modern practices of neocolonialism will become a significant contribution to this. We should mobilize members of the society to protect justice at the world arena. The world of group of friends of the Charter of the United Nations was created. We invite the participants to support its activity. In conclusion, I would like to wish the participants of today's event successful work and new achievements for the benefit of their peoples, for the sake of universal prosperity and development based on mutual respect, indivisibility of security, and mutually beneficial cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Dear colleagues, guests, let us continue the moderation of this plenary session of the Forum of Supporters of Fighting Neocolonialism and for the Freedom of Nations. Our session will be very rich of different speeches and statements, and we would like to ask all the speakers to observe the timing. This is 5 minutes for each. Let me invite the first speaker, Oleg Alexandrovich Romanov. He is the chairman of the Belarus White Russia Party. Honorable organizers of the forum, dear colleagues, friends, by the middle of the 20th century, the global power of colonial powers had weakened. The Second World War, the creation of the United Nations, and the expansion of national liberation movements in 1960s did not allow Western countries to preserve their former colonial system. The decolonization began as a process of former colonies gaining state independence. However, it turned out that this process is an illusion. It just covers the new forms of neocolonialism. From this point of view, after the collapse of colonialism, a post-colonial order consisting of developed and developing countries has emerged in the New World. The new political and economic setup, but the essence remained the same, and the world still is an asymmetric structure with the central countries and the periphery countries. And this is a neo-colonial plan, and the basis for this is not the intention to make the countries closer, but maintain the colonial character of the economic expansion and to adapt it to the new political conditions. And the stakes were put on the imports of new models of neoliberal development. Under the conditions of neocolonialism, everything depends on the centers of the accumulation of the capital. If a country is close to it, then it is developing faster. If not, then it is these countries are doomed to stay behind. The development of some countries and the